Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Production channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another Wednesday review. Today I am reviewing the second full-length album from Colombian heavy metal band Sörceress. It is titled The Four Centaurs, and it was released independently on CD on January 11th, which has been limited to at least 300 copies. Then on February 6th, it was then independently released digitally, and now finally on April 11th, which is several days from now, I think, it will then be released for the first time on cassette through Black Legion Productions, and it is limited. So there you go. All right. So, Sörceress, like I've stated, these guys are from Colombia. Let me see if I can try and pronounce this right, because of their location is at least from, they were based out of from at least Medellin, Antioquia, hope I pronounced that correct, Colombia, and they were formed in 2013, actually, under the name Hellwitch, but then changed their name in 2017 to Sörceress. I think probably because they didn't want to cause confusion with the more known technical death thrash metal band from the US that was titled Hellwitch, that had an album that was released in 1990, I believe, through Wild Rags Records. So that's probably why. So they just changed it to Sörceress, which apparently there's not that many bands apparently named Sörceress, even though there might be. Maybe some bands named that dates all the way back to the 1970s, I think. I don't know. So they just changed it to this. And their apparently they decided to repackage their NBO CHM demo in 2017, which again, that must mean for new wave of Colombian heavy metal. And then finally in 2018 they released their debut self-titled album, and then in 2020, which was just last year, they released a tribute to Chuck Berry with Maybelline. And then finally here in 2021, we're with their second full-length album. It is the Four Centaurs. So without further ado, let me get into my review of, or just my thoughts on, the second album from Colombian heavy metal band Sörceress. So the Four Centaurs, let's get into it. Alright, so before I really get into any of my thoughts on this album, let's do a track listing rundown. We actually have at least 10 songs here. So these 10 songs, and of course it all clocks in at 41 minutes and 37 seconds, so just to get that in there. So finally, these 10 songs are Exodium or Exordium. I hope I, again, pronounced it, because I'm looking through this through Metal Archives and I got my glasses on. Yes, I always have to have my glasses on. I want to be able to see the shit. So, alright. So, again, Exordium, the title track, The Four Centaurs 2, Paranoiac, Riding on the Sun, Born Under Rocks, what the fuck? Herculobius, I hope I pronounced that. Herculobus, I think is what it's actually titled. It must be a Colombian saying there. Forever in Eve, The Enforcer, and then finally Far Away, which apparently it's I don't know, is it I think the reason why that there's a little dot next to it, which I think is either considered because of it, meaning it's a bonus track, or it's because it's just mastered or mixed differently, which I'll probably touch on a bit. So there you go, there's your 10 songs there. I know I kind of struggled a little there because of, again, there's at least one word that kind of threw me off guard, and it's actually the only instrumental on the album. And then, of course, trying to say the first name. So there you go. Alright, so there's your 10 songs. So let's just get into it. The Four Centaurs. I mean, before I really get into any more of the sound on the album, let's definitely do talk about how this album even begins. Which, again, with the opening sort of 1 minute and 29 second track, which is titled Exordium. It's an acoustic style instrumental. Very, very Celtic sounding in some cases too. Very Norse. Very, again, very much medieval time period type of sound. Got a real cool atmosphere to it. So it's used in a way, I almost can see this being used in a video game like Skyrim. So again, it just has that sort of medieval atmosphere going on to it. And then so it lasts for a bit until towards the end. It starts to almost give you a little bit of a almost priest-like twin guitar sort of vibe to it, like something like, for example, like the Hellion from Screaming for Vengeance, or even the 12-inch version of Free Will Burning that was released in like December of 1983, which had an extended long intro. So that it starts to kind of fuse into that sort of feel before then finally just heading right into the title track, which again, it's a very much a sort of new wave or traditional heavy metal style speed metal track that at times is very similar to like Enforcer and so on. That's what you get, and that's where pretty much kind of spells the entire theme of the entire album here. It's pretty much straight up new wave or traditional heavy metal that definitely would have sounded pretty good within the mid 2010s. It just has that sound, that vibe, and if you like bands like either Enforcer or Skullfist, or even other bands like either Action or so on, it's really in that sort of same vibe. It really takes on that sound. So it's definitely straight up new wave or traditional heavy metal. And there's just plenty of other tracks. I do also dig the Four Centaurs too. I don't know why they decided to actually do that, but I guess to kind of keep up a theme. But I feel like when it comes to really good songs, Paranoid then comes next. Because again, I do pick the Four Centaurs. The track is pretty good. So that's actually one of my highlights. Then again, Paranoid. The Enforcer is also a pretty good track. That's pretty much next to at least Far Away, which, again, it is very much mixed differently. Far Away is the proper last track here. And again, it does have a very different mix. This one's more of a straight up, almost speedy power metal kind of track. It's still very speedy, very thrashy, very almost close to the sort of European power metal sound of like either Scanner or bands like Halloween and Gravedigger and that sort of vein. It's in there and it's a good song. I do dig it. So it's a good way to really end the album. But I do want to also talk about at least one of these two other songs, that being Riding on the Sun and Born Under Rocks. They're very close to each other. Riding on the Sun, the beginning opening riff of this track, really, its riff is lifted from Iron Maiden's The Trooper. It's just those sped up more, and again, but it's the same sort of riff. It's the same pattern, but it doesn't last very long because of after that, it then turns into a totally different track. So they really borrowed an Iron Maiden riff for this one song here. So I definitely wanted to at least briefly touch on that. Then finally, the last track I'm going to touch on is Born Under Rocks, which is kind of the sole ballad of the album. Though it's not really it's a ballad, but more in a way I think some people look at Beyond the Realms of Death as kind of a ballad. So it's in that vein, but it's not nearly as like extendedly long as like Beyond the Realms of Death. Because Born Under Rocks clocks in at 4 minutes and 57 seconds. So it's not clearly at like either a little over 6 minutes, but it just has that same atmosphere, that same vibe as a track like, for example, Beyond the Realms of Death would give you. So it's in that sort of vein of being, again, very much an epic style power ballad, where it still is very good, it's still very well written, and it still is a nice song. So I definitely dig that. And of course, then the touch on the getting up to it, Hercolobus. There, I probably now pronounced that Hercolobus, which is the instrumental. It's a fine instrumental nonetheless. I mean, it's not going to be up there as like the top greatest instrumentals in the hard rock and heavy metal world, but it's a fine instrumental. Again, I'm not going to put it next to like songs like either Transylvania or even Narita or again Narita from Riot, or I'm not going to put it even Into the Arena or Genghis Khan. I'm not going to put it in that pantheon of instrumentals, but it's a fine instrumental. I think that was kind of their idea anyways when trying to compose an instrumental, or even Hammerhead from Pat Travers. So it's not anywhere near that, but it's a fine instrumental nonetheless, and it's good. And I think it definitely flows well with the album. So it just, again, it's a way to kind of keep the pace going for the record. Instead of, again, after the ballad, you have to kind of find something that will at least get the album back to being in more of a really, not a full throttle pace, but it's a fine enough pace to get the listener interested again, because you don't want to throw in another slower track. Gotta, again, kind of lift up a bit more of the pacing a bit and kind of speed it up a little bit. again, to get the listener's head bobbing again. So that's why they probably threw it there, which is great. Great pacing, great track listing pacing, and great listing there. So there we go. All right. Again, they add my final thoughts here before I go back into my face in a way. They get the camera back on me. I do want to say it's not the most amazing album I'm going to at least hear in my life, but it's a solid enough album, and I think, if anything, it just seems to really show where the band's progressing. I haven't really checked out their first album. If I did, again, I might have forgot how it sounded. But again, it's a fine progression, and they definitely are showing where they're kind of heading. Again, they're flexing their musical chops here with this one, so it's still a good album. But even if it isn't meant to be extraordinary, amazing, but that's not really the point. It's just a way to kind of, just to give the listener something really good to listen to. And I think that should be taken to notice. That should be the whole point. All right, so there we go. There is my thoughts on the Four Centaurs from Sörceress, and my rating, since I have it all written down here, it's a 8.10 out of 10. That's my rating for it. It's, again, a solid album, and I think an 8.10 out of 10 is a fine enough rating I'm going to give this album. I think it's a fine enough rating for this album. So, if this really does sound like an album you really like, I mean, if you like the new wave or traditional heavy metal stuff to begin with, I can't see you not liking this one. If you do, again, go out and check this one out. I'll probably do my best to leave some links into the description box where you can at least check it out, or you'll probably end up finding it on the New Wave or Traditional Heavy Metal Full Albums channel on YouTube. But if you haven't heard this album, though, I mean, if you have heard it, again, you can leave your comments in the comment section below. But again, if you haven't heard this one, again, I recommend it. So there you go. I hope all of you enjoyed this Every Thrasher Sam out, and I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone. I hope all of you had a good Easter. Take care.